Otherwise, women were wives responsible for running farms, men having cleared the fields, markets. Women ran the markets, hence the stress on the arithmetic. Visiting care of the sick and aged, forming women's secret societies, which were social, political, and economic societies, and supreme arbiters in what transpired in the home. Grade D, 29 to 40. Functionally, not much difference between this group and group C, except that at age 36, exceptionally qualified members could be elected to the Council of Elders. So grade E, 40 plus, Council of Elders. So remember, in America, a century or more ago, before we had invented or rediscovered antibiotics, because in Egypt and China, bread molds were cultivated for penicillin 5,000 years ago, right? So in America, we had to rediscover that. But a century ago, people usually died from infections at 35. So lifespan wasn't necessarily all that long. So just like in Africa, the role of elders could begin at 40 plus. And the role of elders was basically advisory. They rarely met as a council unless something big came up. So usually what happened is your family had a council and family had elders, and they basically policed what happened within the family, unless the offense, because of what had happened in terms of your education, you knew how to act. As old folks in my family said, you had home training. You act like you got some sense, because it reflected on your family if you didn't. And your family is it wasn't just on you, your behavior, it was reflecting on your family. Lack of education, or lack of your taking that education. So technically one could ignore the counsel of an elder's dispute, but ignoring the elder could be seen as ignoring the community and or your family itself. The exception would be if the elder had obviously rendered a bad decision. In that case, it was not left up to the disputants, but to the judgment of the assembled community. So thus the community itself was represented by the crowd assembled, who would indicate their approval or disapproval. Each family had its own elder, and they policed themselves, as I said, because each person was expected to police themselves, which would be less lenient because each family would guard its honor and image. So before a complaint could reach the age grade council, it went to the family first. Elders only rarely handled disputes that could not be handled at a lower level. So he referred to this, Williams referred to this as African democracy. In African democracy, every adult human being had a voice in the government. And basically, you're considered an adult if you successfully go through your rites of passage. Because certainly in the case of male children, if it involved killing a lion and the lion got you, well, you weren't there. You're an ancestor. But if you have successfully succeeded in your rites of passage, you're a fully fledged adult. One of the inscriptions at Luxor Temple in Kemet is "Know thyself." So to be able to unify a nation, even in conquest, the conqueror still has to have a unifying concept of justice. Kemet united diverse ethnic groups through common education and practice. And it was the longest continuing running government in human history, 3,000 years, 30 dynasties. I personally have observed that America is actually one of the first countries to develop that had a similar diversity as Egypt. Because most other countries have a sort of some sort of ethnic identity that's singular. So that unifying justice concept was Ma'at, or Mat. And this is a representation of the goddess of justice. She's a winged one. So Mat is a goddess, a cosmic force, and a philosophy that every aspirant must learn, practice, and master in order to progress on the spiritual path. So Mat has a secular component for the masses and for governing social order, and there's also a metaphysical teaching contained in the Pert Emhiru text and the Mat's teachings. There are two roads. This is a quote. Two roads traveled by humankind, those who seek to live Mat and those who seek to satisfy their animal passions. Those who revere Mat are long-lived. They who are covetous have no tomb. No one reaches the beneficent West, i.e. heaven, unless their heart is righteous by doing Mat. There is no distinction made between the inferior and superior person. It only matters that one is found faultless when the balances and the two weights stand before the Lord of eternity. Now, when the balances. So, this is the goddess Mat, symbolized by her feather. And this is the human heart in the afterlife. So when LBJ said, "My fellow Americans, I come to you with a heavy heart." Okay, he's actually, unknowingly, he's referencing, this is where the concept came from, the scales of justice. Basically, if your heart is light, you are guilt-free. You are free of evil, and so your heart is light. But if your heart is guilty, it weighs heavier than the feather. Heavy heart, light heart. So within the symbolism, wearing the two goddesses with a ankh, symbol of eternal life, two serpents, or uraeus, which is the cobra. Now, within this, also they have what's called Sematawi, which is referred to as Egyptian yoga. You have the crocodile god and the scales. You have the 7 spheres of Ra, that's what these are, also known by their Sanskrit name, 7 chakras. Like, a lot of people think that that yoga came from India. Well, India was actually a colony of Kemet. And what I'm going to explain in terms of just giving a little bit of the culture, because there's a lot of things you could study in terms of beyond reading the book that support what the book talks about. I basically decided to go into this by saying, all right, how do you basically look at what the Egyptian state religion was? Natarianism, or what some people call the Egyptian mystery schools. Part of the primary part of the Egyptian mystery school was the practice of Sematawi, which we would call Egyptian yoga, and basically deals with how you reinforce correct behavior. So the Kemetic system of energy consciousness centers, Sefek Ba-Ra, or the 7 spheres of Ra. First center, I am untainted and provided for the self. I will content and harness my sexuality and create positive thoughts, feelings, and inspiration. I will understand my potentials to serve others. I have and care for others and not just myself. I have the power to control my own destiny. Spirit and matter have the same source, and I am the self. So 1st through 7th. Seven souls of Ra, 7 spheres of Ra, the 7 serpents, Kemetic peoples, drawing of a Nubian, Semitic person, another Nubian, Indo-European, Kemetic. Most people know of Ma'at from the 42 Principles, or the Declarations of Innocence. So the first one, for example, I have not done evil, I have not robbed, I have not stolen, I have not killed people, I have not destroyed food supplies, I have not done fraudulent things, I have not stolen sacred property, I have not told lies, I have not been sullen, I have not been unchaste. 42. So when you look at, for example, the 10 Commandments, Osar Mesh, or as you know of him by his Hebrew name Moses, was raised as Pharaoh's grandson. What would he have been raised in as Pharaoh's grandson? The Egyptian state religion. So are the 10 Commandments original? Would he have been taught the 10 Commandments? No. He would have been taught the 42 Principles of Ma'at as part of being Pharaoh's grandson in the Egyptian state religion. So when you look at this in hieroglyphics, which I don't read hieroglyphics, but I did have this translated. So 16, I have not stolen cultivated land. 19, I have not contended except concerning my own goods. 20, I have not lain with another's wife. So one of the things that Asante talks about between the difference between a pictograph and true writing, which he basically says that writing itself is a representation, symbolic representation of thought, as thought is unspoken language. Okay, so as an example, I have not lain with another one's wife, do not commit, actually committing adultery is separate. So you have, ejaculating penis and testicles. Not sure what the waterfowl is, but here's a woman. I have not committed adultery. Woman figure. I have not been unchaste. So the script of the mystery school, what we call in English the mystery school of initiates, basically hieroglyphics. There's thousands of them, tens of thousands of them. So the script of the mystery school initiates, priesthood, royalty, scribes, and then the script of the common people, which you basically take the Kemetic word demo, which means people, and you break it down, they break thousands of characters down into 26, because you need, for democracy, and we even believe this today, a literate populace. A literate and educated populace. I mean, Mitt Romney might want to defund Big Bird, but some of us believe otherwise. Sesame Street is okay in my book. All right, eventually, the Coptic script was also developed from the Demotic. So basically taking those hieroglyphic characters and translating them into Greek, 26. And I'll show you that in a second here. So Comedian Yoga, Samatawi, part of Shetaut Netter. So these are not just simple exercises, but also the longer name is basically the postures of the gods and goddesses. Her name is Health. She is the daughter of Exercise, who begot her on Temperance. So, Samatawi in practice in ancient times, at least Egypt and Sudan. Basically, this is the course of the Nile. So this is from basically, inscribed in a pyramid depicting everyday comedians. Nubians and Egyptians depicted with the same colors of their skin of alternating black and brown. There is some fiction about Egypt being in the Middle East. That's a British fiction. The use of that term, the Middle East, is not what the inhabitants call themselves, though they may, in talking with English-speaking world, use that convention. But that convention started with British conquest a couple of hundred years ago. Kamit, ancient Egypt, hieroglyphs for that. Kamit, blackness, black. Kamiu, or variant ancient Egyptians, people of the Black Land. Kash, Kush, from the tomb of Amenemhat and Beni Hassan, 12th dynasty, the Middle Kingdom era. Kamit. Shetaut Netter. Shetaut means secret. Netter means divinity, the teaching about the secret, hidden, supreme being. And then Shemsu Netters are basically the followers of Netter. So Netter means divinity. The idea, Netter is what we get, the translated English word from the German nature. Netter is nature. Okay? That the supreme being is basically inside of creation. And in order to know thyself, you can study not only yourself, but how you study yourself is by studying nature. The Supreme Being is inside of every manifest and unmanifest part of creation. So, Shemsu Netter means follower of Netter, or a person who follows the teachings of Shetaut Netter. So part of how this works within a yogic context, or what we call yogic context, in the Sanskrit word asana, it means comfortable seat. So if you're doing cobra asana, you're basically taking the comfortable seat of a cobra. So you're rearing up, I'm not going to demonstrate the position, but basically the idea is, because the cameras won't reach to the floor, but in cobra pose, in order to rear up like a cobra and be there comfortable, your breath has to be under control to be able to hold that position. Your mind has to be focused in that position for it to be comfortable. Om. Now, the Egyptians themselves didn't call it the Leiden magical papyrus. The Leiden is the guy who discovered it, right? Just like, as if you read in your Asante, the Rind papyrus, which is basically mathematics, geometry, etc., and the Ebers papyrus, which is drug technology. Ebers, Rind. It's not what they called it, not what the comedians themselves called it, but it was basically the Europeans that discovered it. All right? So this predates any depiction of the word Om in Sanskrit. Thy likeness is great. Thy likeness. Great is thy name, air is thy name, excellent is thy name, hidden is thy name, mighty one of the gods is thy name, he whose name is hidden from all the gods is thy name, Om, mighty Om is thy name, all the gods is thy name, lotus, lion, ram is thy name, Lu comes the Lord of lands, Ibis is thy name, lotus flower of stars. And the typical Hindu Sanskrit depiction of Om. So principles, one of the things that I was looking at in terms of people who were initiates of what became the Egyptian mystery schools even after Egypt itself fell. So Moses was definitely an initiate of the Egyptian mystery schools, and Yeshua also, when you look at some of the teachings of Shetaut Neter. The purpose of life is to attain the great awakening, that is, enlightenment, to know thyself. That's the purpose of life. Shetaut Neter enjoins the Shedi, and the Shedi is spiritual investigation as life's highest endeavor. It is the responsibility of all humans to promote order and truth. Shetaut Neter enjoins the performance of selfless service to family, community, and humanity. Shetaut Neter enjoins the protection of nature. Shetaut Neter enjoins the protection of the weak and oppressed. Shetaut Neter enjoins the caring for the hungry, homeless, and equality for all people. Shetaut Neter enjoins the equality between men and women. Shetaut Neter enjoins justice for all. Shetaut Neter enjoins the sharing of resources. Shetaut Neter enjoins the protection of and proper raising of children. Enjoins the movement towards balance and peace. So Yeshua, Isha, was an adept, an initiate of Unitarianism, which can bestow titles like the Christ. So title is a title of attainment, not exclusive to one person, as you've been told. Came out of the Egyptian mystery schools. It literally means anointed one. Many aspects of the Egyptian hieroglyphics were, as you saw from the 42 principles of Ma'at, body parts. Like they would have 5 different characters depicting parts of the eye that each had its own particular significance. All right? So literally they had the ability, part of their language was, based on body parts, and that was basically determined by dissection. Okay? So the oil that they're referencing, okay, is neurotransmitters, hormones. Okay? Because in order for those to actually work through the body, they actually have to be thicker than blood and smaller in amount. Okay? So they're talking about, the Lord anointeth my head with oil, that is causing certain, what we call neurotransmitters that support spiritual vision to secrete. Okay? Once these secreted, it was depicted by the Comedians as either a cobra coming out of their third eye point or a person who is winged. Okay? That's symbolizing spiritual attainment. Okay? Person with the cobra or the uraeus coming out of their third eye point was a Christ. There are at least, I've seen a book that referred to 7 to 13 historical Christs before Christ, which we're the only people that think there's only one Christ. These folks saying there's many of them because it came out of their spiritual framework. Okay? So, a Christ, which is attainment of a state where one regularly experiences higher order dimensions of life. The caduceus, which is not a Greek word, it's a Comedian word. Basically, raw force, prana or chi, is accessed via the breath. In Aramaic, ruach, ruach, Holy Spirit is breath and also living water. You have the lunar and solar in Sanskrit, the Ida and Pingala moves up the Shushumna, the central portion of the spine. So you have lunar and solar snakes, central portion of the spine. Where the snakes cross are what you call the chakra points or the 7 spheres of Ra. They meet at third eye. That person is a winged one, and then you have the crown. Royal worth. You see the yogin is doing what we call full lotus. So the philosophy of complementary opposites and the union of the higher and lower self, Sema Yoga. Sematawi, the union of 2 lands, union of Heru and Set. Now, in Asante, where he talked about Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, right? This symbolically was not only uniting the 2 geographical lands, but also the higher and lower self in the human. Now, here you have Heru, Horus, and here you have Set. Now, since the divinity can be expressed through animals, the interesting thing symbolically here, okay, here you have Heru, who is the hero. That's where we get hero. And he is a what? Hawk, falcon, actually. So what is Set?
Jackal.
Looks like a jackal, but no. Close, though. Actually, not close. It's not a jackal.
It's an animal, though.
Looks like an animal, yes. Set is an imaginary creature. I mean, it looked kind of like an aardvark, but
That's what my...
yeah, it's not really. It's not an aardvark. So here's what's happening. This is the esophagus. This is the lungs. One is pulling on a papyrus. The other is pulling on a lotus. They're harnessing the breath. Okay, the image. Another rendition of that figure there. Reuniting Heru and Set. The divinities representing virtue, Heru, and vice, Set, actually make peace, and in so doing foment a sema, or a union. They tie the lotus and papyrus plants, Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, higher and lower self. In the same manner, the aspirant who wants to overcome the vices needs to engender a movement towards virtue. This allows the personality to be purified and the lower nature is subdued, and then the true essential being, Heru, emerges shining brightly to illuminate the individual, and all will come in contact with him or her. So to foment this union, you yoke the breath. So another way of showing this is that here you have Heru, who has mastered the breath, and then Set is behind him. And the reason I'm pointing this out is that Set is a personification of evil or vice. Uncontrolled breath, if you will. Yeshua was an adept of the Natarian school, even though we think of him as being Jewish. Technically he wasn't, but I will get into that when we get into that time period. Who does Yeshua consider evil? The embodiment of evil. Come on, this is easy, right?
Lucifer?
And what's another name for Lucifer?
The devil.
The devil. What else? Another name for him?
Satan.
Satan. Okay? Now, anybody Jewish here? Okay. Well, you may not know this, but in his time, Yeshua's time, and today, the people we call the Jews did not believe in a hell and did not believe in a devil. Did not and do not. So who then is this Satan? In Aramaic, Satana literally means adversary. That which distracts us. And it's not outside of you. Because remember, he doesn't believe in a hell or a devil. Satana means adversary, that which distracts us. It actually means your own personal ego. That's what Sed is, internally. Sed is subdued by control of the breath. That's what the symbolism is. Okay? Heru emerges victorious through control of the breath, yoking the breath. Breath in Aramaic, Holy Spirit. How do you know love your enemy? In Aramaic, it means controlling your breath. Okay? When Egypt falls, because eventually it does, the technology, the spiritual technology is basically being spread among the people that used to be subject. Right? Yeshua is basically saying, well, I'm referencing Mosaic law. Where did Moses get his law? All right, so Satana. And we'll get into that when we get into that time period, but we're way before that right now. Satana. So Satana becomes Satan. And then again, but then he gets turned into an evil archangel, and you get the whole Lucifer thing, and yeah. We'll explore that more later. So, integral spirituality. So, the four main disciplines of Sheti: devotion, meditation, which includes yoga, exercise, wisdom, and selfless service. Devotion, meditation, wisdom, and selfless service. Process of personality integration. Understanding leads to peace, love, contentment, fulfillment. So it's not so much that they're worshiping all these different creatures and gods and goddesses. All the gods and goddesses are basically understood to be different manifestations of the same one being. Emotion, reason, action, will. So emotion, devotional love; reason, wisdom; action, righteousness and virtue; and will, focusing your will through meditation. And the yogic exercises. So integral spirituality. So discipline of ritual movements through hekau, magic, so to speak, and martial arts, and semapaut. So for example, in this depiction of martial arts, very similar to what we see in the Asian martial arts, karate and kung fu, same ideas, with weapons, or karate, empty hand, is what karate means. Okay, where you're basically moving to reenact the motions and attitudes of the divinity. Whoever has eaten the knowledge of every god, their existence is for all eternity and everlasting in their spirit body. What they willeth, they doeth. So the different phases in the practice of the Egyptian workout, there's actually whole books on Egyptian yoga. Postures may be practiced with a lower or higher number of repetitions in order to engender a more basic or intense workout. Program may be practiced in such a way that the mythic teachings are imparted throughout so that the practitioners gain an understanding of the psycho-spiritual principles to be cultivated. Program may be practiced as a meditative session by reducing the number of repetitions and holding the postures for a longer period of time while being led through guided imagery into a silent reflection of on each posture. And a meditative form, no guided imagery instruction given by the leader except the name of the posture. The skilled practitioners move from one posture to another in a flowing and balanced manner, thereby developing the inner spontaneous movement of the Netiru cosmic consciousness and intuitional harmonizing of the individual within the cosmic. So for example, this is Nut. Nut is a sky goddess, and it's also known in India as the wheel pose. This is a plow pose, full lotus, headstand. This is a position of Isis. Oh, this is Nut, the sky goddess. So, for example, in Indian styles of yoga where they talk about sun salutation, in Kemet it's referred to as Ra's journey, Ra being the sun god. So the beginning, before creation, what in India they call corpse pose, Karast, mummy pose. And then journey of Ra pose. So journey of Ra's journey through the sky is the standing work, and then the floor work is when Ra dies and travels through the underworld and then rises again reborn. Okay, so you emulate the action of the Netars, parts of creator and creation. Ra travels through the sky, dies, and travels through the underworld, standing versus floor exercises. Scorpion pose, crocodile pose, cobra pose, sphinx pose, Horus pose and variations, Nut pose, Maat pose, Aset, that is Isis, Isis wing pose, Isis Aset, Aset sitting pose. All right, so this isn't just going to church. This is inner practice. All right? So the question of how do you reinforce the teachings of Mat on a daily basis and throughout the people. So this isn't just the priests practicing this. This is being taught to the common people as well. Because it doesn't necessarily require, being able to read hieroglyphics. All you need is the story. And this is from the Book of Egyptian Yoga. We have live models. This is another one of this particular person's book, The Mystical Journey from Jesus to Christ. What is now, a quote by St. Augustine, what is now called the Christian religion has existed among the ancient and was not absent from the beginning of the human race till Christ came in flesh, in which time the true religion, which was already in existence, began to be called Christian. So let's talk about the alphabet. As Asante talks about that one of the characteristics of civilization is writing, and writing is thought. So you have, basically this is the origins of the Semitic script. So what we're writing in when we go A, B, C, D, to Z, right, is the Latin alphabet. And the reason it's the Latin alphabet is because this is the alphabet of the Romans. So for example, so you hear the Roman alphabet, A through M. So you have on the chart Kemetic, then Semitic, Phoenician, Greek, and then the Roman. So it's called alphabet because of the first two characters in Greek, alpha and beta, alphabet. So you can see the evolution and the corresponding terms. So what this is basically the Demotic script. So remember, hieroglyphics had tens of thousands of characters, and that was only for the scribes and royalty and the priests. The common people had the Demotic script. So instead of thousands to learn, they had 26. The letter V became U in 500. There are two V's, was also written as double U and became W around 1000. J was the last letter added, evolving from I around 1600. So the reason I put this in, so I like to dissect historical fiction promoted in movies. Not that I particularly liked, I particularly dislike Mel Gibson, but the movie The Passion of the Christ, where he purports to use Aramaic as part of the dialogue. One of the things that he put in there was a J. Yeah, I don't know if you watch the crucifixion scene. I just kind of watch it to see the what's clearly propaganda, and basically he had Jesus. Well, there was no J in the Roman alphabet at the time, so that would be a lie. So usually what you see in a Roman-style crucifix And it's a Roman-style crucifix because the Roman-style crucifix was not the original cross of Christianity. It was the Ankh that was the original cross of Christianity, according to the dictionary. The Ankh explicitly refers to and means eternal life. Roman cross is a this KRS-One referred to the basically wearing a Roman cross is like wearing a electric chair. It was a torture and capital punishment device. The African forms of Christianity don't use the Roman cross. They use either the Ankh or they use the Ethiopian cross, which is, well, I'll actually show you that when we get to the Christian era, but it looks like Ethiopian crosses look like this. Make no reference to the Roman one. All right, so INRI. Yeshua Nazareth Rexius Israel. Okay, no J, not Jesus of Nazareth, King of Israel. Yeshua Nazareth Rexius Israel. That's what that means. So, imagine African life along the Nile 5,500 years ago, as depicted by the paintings of Thebes and modern-day Luxor. This is a warm society of astronomers, mathematicians, chemists, architects, doctors, musicians, and dancers. Close to nature, collectivist, free from want, society without prisons, because you got capital punishment, capable of fulfilling the material, spiritual, and creative needs of its people. Paintings depicting gardens with trees and multicolored flowers, fish ponds, birds, lotus blossoms. In that setting, schools, homework of school children is being corrected, artists are at work, magistrates are at their benches, a girl pauses while gleaning grain, and someone's hair is being braided outdoors in the meadow. A goldsmith puts finishing touches on a jewelry piece, a gardener is planting, and craftsmen are making furniture. Men and women celebrate around a banquet table, entertained by musicians and dancers. Different view of that. So Kemetic, Semitic, Phoenician, Greek, Roman. Let's see here. Right. It's blank. So to bring this, to bring this to today, one of the people that Asante references is Maulana Ron Karenga, who, in addition to creating the concept and the African-American holiday Kwanzaa is part of a larger construct called Kawaida. So I put this together in a construct called the strings of the Kora. And there are 21 elements of Kawaida, and so the Kora, which is a species of African harp, many of them played around Egypt. It is the instrument of the griot, which is a combination storyteller, poet, diplomat, and healer. So 7 days of Kwanzaa, which is what most people know of Kawaida, but it's also 7 products of culture and 7 levels of organization. The Nguzu Saba, 7 principles of blackness, from the Kiswahili. Starting with the first day, unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith in order. Umoja, which is Kiswahili for unity or peace. Kujichagulia, self-determination. Ujima, collective work and responsibility. Ujama, cooperative economics. Nia, purpose. Kuumba, creativity. And Imani, faith. 7 levels of social interaction and 7 products of culture. So the individual, informal group, organization, institution, community, society, and globe. And the 7 products of culture: spirituality and religion, politics, creative production, arts and sciences, economics, social organization, history, and psychology. So put together in a single graphic what I call the strings of the Kora is Karenga's Kawaida. So you have Shiva, who is dancing on, who is basically creating the world and destroying the world. He is standing on tradition, which comes out of innovation. And basically trying to distill, what Karenga was attempting to do is trying to distill broad spectrum African culture into something that could be more usable, more user-friendly, unless you were going to actually go and do the study yourself, which he also encouraged. I like to teach it as a problem-solving mode, which again requires that you know most of the elements and begin to practice them beyond just concept. So, for example, the Kora is described as a species of a harp. It has 21 strings which can be tuned in a major triad, but when you play, you actually do it in a diatonic scale, that is 7 tones. So the symbolism is there are 3 sets of 7 strings, each representing the past, present, and future. And when you play a Kora, all the like-tuned strings vibrate with each other. So in this way, different themes in Kawaida repeat and find similarity and resonance. So for example, pick a social problem. Any social problem that's persistent. Depression as a social problem?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't think that's an individual problem?
It's kind of social now.
Kind of social. So why are people depressed?
Society as a whole is directing people to focus on their depression.
Okay. I'll go with that. Depression. All right. So let's say that so depression. So you said that's a social problem. Is that emotional or economic? We do talk about we're in a recession, not a depression, or we're coming out of recession. The worst economic slump since the Great Depression, right? So depression could be economic. Right?
Yeah, it's both.
So, right, it's both. So, as an example then, is depression an individual problem or a social problem? Could be both. How do you affect both? So if it's an individual problem, and that what does the study of depression fall under? What science?
Psychology.
Psychology. Okay. So whose version of psychology?
Exactly.
Okay. Psychology literally means study of the soul in Greek, as they learned it from the Egyptians. Okay, you just saw a whole thing about Natarianism. Okay, so if we basically use a Natarian's view of how you deal with depression, you need to exercise. You need to focus your mind. You need to watch your diet, because that's one of the things I didn't talk about in there. Okay, so right diet, right thought, breathing correctly, exercising correctly helps your depression. Right? Which is one of the things that we're saying today, right?
It could also be tied into spirituality.
It could be tied into spirituality, because literally, if it means a study of the soul, in English, we basically made that a province of religion or spirituality. Okay? In Kemet, the state religion was not so much just worshipped in temples, it was practiced every day in the street. How you treated people in your everyday interaction. Okay? The cure to a condition and the health of the nation is in you. You're a part of it. What is your place? Okay? You're depressed. Why are you depressed? Maybe you're supposed to be depressed for a reason. I mean, if you lose somebody that's close to you through grief, you're supposed to be depressed. Though we often will say, oh, well, they've gone home. That person who's died has gone home. So we should be celebrating. Okay, well, both things happen. You're personally sad, but you're glad for them because they've graduated, so to speak. Lots of different ways of looking at that. So a multiplicity of views. All right, so what if it's an economic depression affecting a society, or let alone a globe or a community? So what is an economy?
Exchange of goods and services.
Or exchange of things that are valuable. Goods and services are one thing that's valuable, but what else is valuable? Knowledge. What else? No, really, that's good. Knowledge, you're on the right track. What else? How many of you read newspapers? What? What newspaper?
Register Guard.
Register Guard, okay. Anything else?
Not on a regular basis.
Okay. You subscribe to the Register Guard?
No.
Okay. Here's part of my home training. So what I do, what I find with the Register Guard is it's limited. And a lot of times they get their stories from other newspapers, like, for example, the New York Times. So I actually do subscribe to the Register Guard, but I also have the New York Times on my iPad, as well as getting the print version of the Sunday Times on Sunday, because it actually have like a week in review of top stories, et cetera, et cetera. So for example, an economy of ideas, all right? So there's a guy who invented the software for Siri. The idea that you could talk to your computer and it would respond back to you. The problem was that a competing company also had a similar idea. All right? So he went to Apple first, and he had, some venture capital, et cetera, talking computer. And this other company sued him for patent infringement, which he won. But now all the money that he was going to use to start up his company went to lawyers. So the other company wound up buying him out. And he's out, right? Well, how do you patent an idea? The economics of an idea, right? Disney, For example, Walt Disney, the classic story about an idea. What does this have to do with economics? Well, he had Oswald the rabbit. And the people that he was working with stole the idea and patented Oswald the rabbit, and he was shut out of his company. Well, he said, well, and he was bummed for a little bit, but, well, the rabbit didn't make me. I made the rabbit, so I can come up with another rabbit. And so what happened is he comes up with Mickey Mouse. Nobody's heard of Oswald the rabbit. And Mickey Mouse, you can't buy the logo, but it's like one of the most recognizable and expensive patents that are in existence today. And it's just an idea, Mickey Mouse. So there's nothing Mickey Mouse about Mickey Mouse. The idea, economy, all right? So it's ideas and things and practices that are also part of the economy. That if the economy is depressed, is that there's not enough ideas, or that the ideas that would be bringing you out of the depression not coming forth. Could be either one, right? But you would have to know, well, where ideas come from, and then how to either market them or look at how you promote certain ideas over others to bring you out of the depression. I like talking about, say, drug technology and addiction. So, for example, one answer to depression, and I'm not promoting this, I'm just making the observation. There are many people that feel that an education in terms of what you're doing is a waste of time in terms of making money. Okay? And they point to people like Bill Gates as well as Freeway Ricky Ross. I don't encourage you to take Ricky Ross's road. Y'all know who Ricky Ross is? Okay. One of the major suppliers of cocaine from the Contras. So the beginning of what used to be in one country an unknown, largely unknown herb up until 150 years ago, cocaine, suddenly explodes on the global market. And so individuals who are out of work can participate in the underground economy within a society. So actually there's an analysis that can be done where if there was actually a theory in terms of where drug dealing gangs come from in the United States. Obviously, drugs are really expensive, Dare. Drugs are really expensive. So, who becomes a drug dealer? Well, one of the earliest theories in 1919 was basically that immigrants basically are part of a criminal subculture, and that's where gang problems come from. Except in 1919, the guy writing it, Thrasher, is basically saying that Russians, Bohemians, Jews, Italians, Swedes, Norwegians, they have a criminal culture. Not making this up. Okay? Irish, Scottish, right? So he's saying the drug dealers are European immigrants. And we should therefore limit immigration. Because these people aren't American. They don't have American values. I'm not making this up. This is history, right? Okay? So you have people like Joe Kennedy. Okay? The patriarch of the Kennedy clan, who the family says, oh, he made his money in real estate. Well, how does an Irish person who isn't part of the legal economy become a real estate mogul? By running rum and prohibition. He's a drug dealer. So he makes enough money. Look for pictures. Get to work. Come on. So basically what he did is, since his informal group could not get into the large overground economy, what they did is they ran rum and prohibition. That made him enough money selling an illegal drug so he could send his kids to Harvard and they could become presidents. Okay, so drug dealing gangs were, originally immigrants, but the drug dealing gangs have been going on in America for 175 years. Now, what happens when the Kennedy boys get to go to Harvard? They don't have to send their kids. They can send their kids to college and they don't have to participate in the underground economy anymore. They've become legit. Okay, is the mafia just going to do drugs and prostitution? No, they buy insurance companies and record companies. Warner Brothers, as an example. Okay, they invest in banks. They have banks money launder. Boom, boom, boom. They move up the economic ladder. Now, some people aren't being allowed to move up the economic ladder through the legitimate economy. And they also aren't necessarily taught the rules of how money works within a society. Okay, so many of our social problems, when you say what goes around, comes around, okay? You have recursive, that is repeating patterns, all right? And understanding that there is within, for example, history, not just looking at the events that have been told by a particular hero, but also looking at history through the lens of economics and politics. So politics is the science of power. Who has it, who doesn't? What are the hidden infrastructure? Okay, so when I was talking about crash last week, just understanding that, and if you've never seen an analysis like that, okay, we study, African Americans study not only racism, but also how a particular point of view can shape not only history, psychology, but also economics. It has an economic consequences. All right, so griots. So in terms of tradition and innovation, so no doubt some griots might have been captured as slaves and imported to America. Koras would have been in short supply in America, so they would have need to be invented. So the Kora may be, this one says maybe, but I believe it was an inspiration for the American banjo, which is an African instrument from Senegal, the home of many slaves, than the banjo. Basically, American banjo shares lots of attributes of the Senegalese Kora. That is, you have a bridge on an animal skin, strings which are tuned in a particular way, and a percussive style of playing. So tradition and innovation. So those two twin influences in African culture, tradition and innovation. So response to survival needs generates an innovation, something that has been tried before. If the innovation works, it becomes a tradition. So obviously in the case of the banjo, not all arts of the griot get carried over into African American culture, but the blues and gospel and other things do. So part of the piece in talking about rites of passage, Kemet, all right? We don't necessarily have the educational system in America to produce the unity that was evident 5,000 years ago, which of course wasn't without its problems. All right, so to begin to do that, we had to invent quote unquote ethnic studies, because we didn't have an educational system that was based on teaching everybody about everybody from everybody's point of view. So Kawaida then can be a recreation of the basic skills of a griot or jolly. So you blend multiple languages, multiple histories, tell multiple stories with multiple meanings. The griot or griot will be able to weave his or her poem, tale to the fit of the audience before them. Kawaida then is a way of capsulizing African culture for an African American audience and others. So hip hop is basically the griot in the 20th and 21st century, except without necessarily hip hop artists knowing about how to do drums. As a jazz musician, my bias is clear. Instruments, not samples. But, okay, enough of that. Griots and griots. So in tradition, in innovation, when traditions don't work, and depending on what the tradition is, try innovation. Denied the Kora, create a banjo. No instruments, and so, I mean, that's part of the history. I remember when music was in public schools. I learned to play trumpet before piano and guitar. But then the Beatles hit the 6th grade, and so in order to be one of the cool kids, you had to play guitar, right? So, no instruments, use a turntable or sampler. When music was taken out of public schools, people basically started using turntables and samplers. Deny the drum, use hand claps, create gospel. Outside of the church, sing the blues, jazz, rock, rap, hip-hop, and whatever else comes next. So, moja, unity, hidden unity within diversity. All Africans are one people. Kujichagulia, self-determination, to define ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Are we descendants of slaves or scientists and explorers? Are we up from slavery or down from the pyramids? Are we in terms of African Americans, are we 400 years, that is, we were imported as slaves and never came here before, or are African Americans actually part of a 2,500-year history in American Turtle Island? And see where my bias is. Okay? Ujima. So Kujichagulia, self-determination. Ujima, collective work and responsibility, to build and maintain our community together and make our sisters and brothers' problems our problems and solve them together. Takes a village to raise a child. Kwanzaa being the public face of Kawaida, a time to practice cultural remembrance amidst the materialism of Christmas, and the Nguzu Saba to be practiced throughout the year. So Black History Month is every day. So to continue, Ujamaa, cooperative economics. To build and maintain our own shops, stores, and other businesses and profit from them together. Community benefit over individual profit. So for example, welfare to business in Mississippi, what I call Mississippi Mondragon, the Nation of Islam, African socialism, communalism are all examples of Ujamaa. Guess I should explain that, huh? African socialism goes like this. What I'll call Mississippi Mondragon. M-I-S-S-I, S-S-I, P-P-I. Okay, to explain that, have you heard of Mondragon? Mondragon cooperatives? You know the difference between capitalism and cooperative? Yes? No? Thank you. Copy that. So, in capitalism, a capitalist, that is a single person or collective, a single person, becomes an investor, buys a business, starts a company. And the profits go to single person up at the top. Okay? That's a single owner or owners, maybe a partnership, a single owner. That's basic capitalism. In a cooperative, the workers own the business. Okay, so when I was talking the other day about, okay, how come gold miners don't own the gold mine? They're the ones doing the work, producing the gold. How is it that people that don't go into the mines own the company that does the gold? How is that? All right? Here's how Mondragon works. Mondragon is a cooperative corporation in Basque Spain with about 170 interlocking cooperatives organized along finance, distribution, and manufacturing. Okay? And they started in Basque Spain, which was a depressed area. There's that word depression again. And they started their own business that was owned equally with 13 people. And that expanded. And one of the first things they did was create a bank. How many of you would get together and could create a bank? You could do that. That's where OUR Credit Union came from when it existed. People got together and created a bank because they couldn't get bank loans. Students, community people, poor people created their own bank. Okay, you're not taught how to do that, but you can do it. It is legal for you to do it. In Mondragon, they created a bank. Then they created a college to teach people how to do manufacturing. Then they did manufacturing. People got hurt on the job. Then they created another cooperative to create a hospital. Then they created an insurance company to pay for the medical care. Boom, boom, boom. 170 interlocking cooperatives. Okay, that make 10 billion euro profit a year. And it's still going. Now, you never heard about them. I wonder why that is. Okay, so Mississippi Mondragon goes like this. Group of black people in Mississippi in the 90s. Okay, a Mississippi welfare check is about $300. If you ever tried to live on $300 a month, you know, if you're on welfare, you cannot have a savings account. It's illegal. You can get food stamps, but no savings account. Okay? Needless to say, you're not taught how to get skillful with money. So here's what they did. Thanks. They pooled their welfare checks. Let's say that there's 10 of them. And let's say they contribute 10% of their welfare checks. So in other words, there's a microloan of $300. One of them takes that $300 and starts a business. Now, this is illegal. It is illegal to take your welfare check and start a business with it. And I'm not disputing that it's illegal. But guess what? At the end of the year, each person working this project had got themselves off of welfare. Because welfare doesn't teach you how to do business. They learned on their own. Now, how come welfare reform doesn't talk about making you become an entrepreneur? Learning how to save money. Doesn't teach you that. It teaches you to be dependent. Or welfare reform means, each one of these people has to go work 5 minimum wage jobs and leave their kid at home alone. How is that helping anything? So here's the piece. Black people came up with this. An oppression, basically, it's an example of Ujamaa, collective cooperative economics. Okay, they shared a welfare check, and I said it's illegal, but it got them off of welfare. Nothing the government did that. 60 Minutes covered it as an example of welfare fraud, which, look, it is, because it's illegal. You can't share your welfare check to start a business. But guess what? Where is the government's program for getting people off welfare, making them successful entrepreneurial folks? You think the Republicans would be all down with that? No. Okay? We came up with this. All right? And it's an example of, again, 60 Minutes reported on it, so it does exist. All right? We'll take this up more on Wednesday.
Have a good one.
All right.
Just